Hello, friends. How are you all? I hope you're doing fantastic and taking care of yourself. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I to basically share my journey of learnings on DevOps and cloud on this YouTube video. Recently, I've started the shell scripting series, which will help you to prepare yourself from the shell scripting fundamentals like what is shell scripting, types of shell scripting, how can you write and execute your first shell script, how can you basically use the variables in the shell script, what are different type of operators like relational operators, arithmetic operators, file test operators, string operators, and we are going to cover a lot of more in the upcoming videos where I'm going to talk about the usage of array in shell script, how to debug a shell script when something occurs, kind of an error, or you're basically writing a code and before even deploying into the production environment or UAT environment you want to test that script into the IST or SIT environment. So we are going to talk about a lot of interesting things on shell script. So do go and watch my journey of shell scripting series on my YouTube channel. Before we start with today's video, I would like to show you some stats which will help you to take a decision whether in 2024/2025 should I learn DevOps, and if the answer is yes, then what roadmap should I follow to be a good DevOps specialist or a DevOps engineer. So without much further delay, let's get into the survey results. So friends, as you can see on the screen, according to the developer survey conducted by the Stack Overflow in 2024, DevOps specialist holds 1.7 percentage of market as the developer type of role when compared to the full stack developer role, backend developer role, etc. According to my point of view, this role, which is DevOps specialist or a DevOps engineer, is going to emerge in the upcoming years, especially in 2025, 2026, where the companies who are looking to set up the DevOps culture in their organization, as well as focusing on the deployment, continuous integration, continuous delivery, and none other than infrastructure as code. So this helps us to basically go into another point, how much salary you can expect for a DevOps engineer role. And if you see, the DevOps specialist starting salary is $72,611, and this is really significant as compared to the other roles as a backend developer, full stack developer, SRE, and couple of other roles. So according to my point of view, this is the right time to buckle up your seats and start learning DevOps, and I'm going to basically share the roadmap which will help you to be a good DevOps engineer or a DevOps specialist. So without much further delay, let's get into the roadmap for DevOps in 2024/2025. So friends, here is our DevOps roadmap in 2024/2025. So you are here. Now, the first thing before even starting learning the tools of revolving around the DevOps, you should first understand what is DevOps, why there was a need of DevOps. What is DevOps culture, collaboration, communication, what makes DevOps engineer or a specialist different when we compare with a full stack developer role, SRE role, platform engineer role, a software developer, and etc. So the first thing is, what is DevOps? It is nothing but bringing the two teams together. One is a development team and one is the operations team. Back in days before even the DevOps exists, in a traditional software development cycle, we used a developer team used to basically get the requirement from the operations team, and they used to basically plan, design, build and deploy the code in the lower environments, which can be an IST, SIT, or a UAT environment, and hand over that product for the testing to the operations team. Doing this whole cycle of planning, designing, building, the operations team was not aware what is going on. And when the final product is given to the operations team, they found that lot of the functionality were not working, or they were not designed as per expected, and then the whole cycle used to repeat again, which delayed the end product delivery to the operations team. To solve this problem, the lot of big brains come together and they develop a culture called as a DevOps culture, which will basically help you to work collaboratively with your operations team, and at the same time operations team is present throughout the software development cycle, which is planning, designing, building of the code, deploying in IST, UAT, SIT environment, testing, and the finally product deliver in the production environment. So that's where the need of DevOps came into the picture. Now let's understand what is DevOps cycle. As I mentioned, plan, gathering the requirements, or creating a user stories in today's agile world, where the operations team have an access to the agile tools like Jira, where they basically create a ticket, put down all the requirements, and then doing our scrum calls, we discuss that requirement. Second thing is develop, which is building a code, and once the code is built, you need someone to review that code. The third stage is the build, which is continuous integration, build automation. Don't worry, we are going to talk about much detail, where DevOps also focuses on automating the build. Previous days were there where you used to basically build the code manually by running an Apache Maven, create a war file or a jar file, and then deploy it. But now, with the help of lot of tools, which is continuously integration, continuous deployment tools available, the DevOps focuses on the build automation as well. Test, designing an automated test flows. Previously there was no designing of or executing the test cases automatically. The operations team used to basically write the test cases and then execute that. But now, with the help of DevOps tools like Jenkins, you can basically design the testing workflows as an automated process and make it available to an operations team with the results which have been passed, which have been failed. The fifth important thing is the release, which is continuously delivery. And the last important thing of the DevOps lifecycle is monitor. Once you have deployed the code, you need to basically monitor that, right? Whether it's running as per an expected, or have you encountered any bugs. So let's fix those bugs and make it bug free product. Moving to the next one, which is our networking. If you are planning to learn DevOps, you should understand the fundamentals of networking. So you should be familiar with the OSI model, what is happening at application layer, what is happening at network layer. So there are around 7 layers. You should be familiar with all those layers. The second thing is you should be familiar about the TCP and UDP protocol, familiar with the HTTP, HTTPS. What happens when you type www.google.com, and how does it works? The request, then there is something called as a DNS, which basically takes the domain name and convert into an IP address and couple of other things. So you should be familiar with that whole cycle of what is SSH, how can you make a passwordless connection, load balancers, DNS, as I mentioned, route tables. So those are some of the important things you should know when you're preparing yourself for the DevOps role. Moving to the one important thing, which is Linux. So if you're planning to learn Linux, you should be familiar with the architecture of Linux, the kernel. How does shell interacts with the kernel, and the kernel interacts with the hardware, and that whole cycle of interpretation of the command up to the execution of the command. So some of the important things, when we talk about the basic commands you should be familiar when you're learning the Linux, is grep, df, du, cut, awk, sed, top, netstats, ns lookup, free, VM stats, htop. There are other commands also, but I would highly recommend that you prepare these commands, because these are frequently asked into the interview when you're attending for the DevOps role or SRE role or any support role kind of thing. You should also be familiar with the file permissions: read, write, execute, group permissions. And the last important point from the Linux perspective is the process management. What are the process states? What is the process control, which is signate, sig term, sig kill, process identification. How are you going to identify a particular process? By using ps minus ef, ps minus aux command. Then the process management, which is if your process is hung, how are you going to identify that? By using a top command. How before even killing any process, you would be taking the thread dump to understand what exactly happened to why to that process, why that process got hung, by using kill minus 3. So those are some of the important things you should be familiar when you are learning Linux. Now let's look on the left hand side of our DevOps journey. We have covered on right hand side what is DevOps, DevOps Lifecycle, networking, Linux, what are the commands you should be familiar with. But now let's talk about the version control system. Understand why there was a need of Git. What makes Git separate from a traditional SVN or a perforce repository? Learn the basic commands of Linux like git init. How can you do a git commit, git logs, git push, git pull, git fetch. What is difference between a git pull and a git fetch? This was one of my interview question asked. So get yourself familiar with this concept of git pull versus git fetch. Understand what is local, working and remote repository. Once you have got familiar with this, start learning configuration management. You do not need to learn each and every tool. Focus on learning one tool and become a master on it. I have started when starting my journey of DevOps, I started learning Ansible, because it's widely used in the a lot of banking financial organization. So learn why we need an Ansible, what importance it adds when compared to the earlier days. So back in earlier days, whenever we want to install anything, like for an example, I want to install a Prometheus agent or New Relic agent or Grafana agent on 5 or 6 servers, system administrator used to log into each and every server and install that, which was time consuming. But with Ansible, it has become easier. So with the Ansible, you can write a playbook, because Ansible uses an SSH key logic. So once you have established an SSH key, it will go ahead and install the agent on all your servers. So that's one of the advantage of Ansible. Moving to the other thing is CI/CD tools. There are a lot of CI/CD tools available in market, but the Jenkins is an old fish in this pond of CI/CD tool market. So learn, Jenkins, how can you write a declarative script, how can you write a pipeline script, how can you set up a project roles in the Jenkins. Once you are done with that, move on the IAC, which is infrastructure as code. Focus on learning Terraform because these days organizations are moving their on-premise infrastructure to the cloud. So how can you basically write a Terraform code to create an infrastructure on the cloud, which can be your AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, Alibaba, etc. Once you are done with that, one of the important thing is the containerization and the orchestration. So learn what is Docker. Do not directly move on the Kubernetes. First understand what is the container, why there was a need of container. Back in days, we used to basically deploy the code on server, and that package of the code used to be a bigger size. With the containerization coming in the picture, our application package has become a smaller size because in containers are nothing but a lightweight container where you pack all the dependencies of your application. You put all your libraries needed to basically run that application. So learn what is Docker, what is Docker image, Docker file, Docker registry, Docker hub, which is nothing but a Docker repository. There are a lot of tools, a lot of tutorials available on YouTube. I have personally preferred learning tech with Nena, and it really helped me out to get my concepts clear on the DevOps. Also learn about Docker compose. There are a lot of commands like Docker compose up, Docker compose down, Docker compose logs. Once you're familiar with this, also get yourself familiar with the Docker commands like Docker run, Docker ps, Docker stop and start, Docker pull, Docker build, Docker images, Docker logs, Docker tag. Once you are familiar with all these stuff related to containerization, now move to the world of orchestration, which is none other than Kubernetes. Why we needed Kubernetes? With the emerging complexity of the application, it became hard to manually scale up the containers, stop and start the containers. Someone needs to manually log into the servers, scale up the containers, or bring scale down the containers. But with the Kubernetes, this has become an automated process. That's where the Kubernetes comes into a picture, and that's where we call as a container orchestration. So learn about how can you troubleshoot the Kubernetes pods or a container, right? How can you scale up the pods or a container or scale down as and when needed. Once you're done with this, focus on the automation. Right now, everywhere the people are looking for the Python developer. So, and as well as start learning first the shell scripting. Once you're familiar with the shell scripting, you can learn Python scripting easily. There are a lot of there are a lot of modules or libraries available in Python, which makes your life easier to use and implement that. So start learning with first shell scripting. I have created the shell scripting series on my YouTube channel, so do go and watch that. Soon I will be starting the Python scripting on my YouTube channel, but there are a lot of videos available on the YouTube which will help you to kickstart your career in the Python world. Once you are done with that, get yourself familiar with the monitoring. So once you have deployed the code, now comes the maintenance stage. How there should be some monitoring in place which will monitor your application infrastructure. So there are a lot of tools for that like Grafana, Prometheus. You do not need to learn each and every tool, but you should be familiar with one one, two, or three tools which are widely used uh, mm, in the technology world or by the different industries like Grafana, Prometheus, Kibana, Datalog. For log monitoring, go for Splunk. Splunk is very easy to learn. Learn Dynatrace, App Dynamics, New Relic. So get yourself familiar with these tools and master in one or two. You should know the other tools, be like a jack of trades but master of one or two. So that's what I would suggest. Finally, contribute. So once you have learned things, contribute by giving back to the community. There are lot of forums available which can help you to get the information of how to troubleshoot, how to do that. So share your experience on Medium platform. Be a part of AWS community builders, the DevOps Cube, Hashnode, Microsoft Learn. Once you are done with this, nowadays the organizations are moving their infrastructure to the cloud. So focus on learning one of the cloud like AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, Alibaba, whichever you want. AWS still holds the highest market in the cloud world, and second place comes to the Azure. And I prefer AWS and Azure because they were easy for me to learn, and I have gained experience day by day on that cloud provider. Finally, if you want to validate your knowledge, enroll yourself for the certification. There is an CKNA certificate, which is Kubernetes Certified Native Administration, which will help you to test your knowledge on the Kubernetes. Then there is CKA, Certified Kubernetes Administrator. There is CKAD, which is Certified Kubernetes and administrator slash developer. Then there is PCA, which is Prometheus Certified Associate. You have also the foundation certificates organized by Linux Foundation on DevOps and SRE. Once you have prepared yourself for the Pacific Cloud, you can basically move or climb the ladder by doing a professional certificates like AWS DevOps Professional certificate. Then there is Azure DevOps Professional. Also there is Google. There is certificate by Oracle. So get yourself once you get yourself prepare for these certifications, because this will help you to validate your knowledge of what you have learned. So that was pretty much about my learning experience and sharing with you. I hope this video will definitely help you to kickstart your journey in the DevOps engineer role or a DevOps specialist role in 2025. Do comment, because your comments really help me to motivate and come up with such videos. Until then, take care. Bye bye.